So welcome back. So I am now on I would say section 3, which is the backend. And then in the backend, I will be mainly talking about part 1, user authentication and authorization with Cognito. And then one thing I will be showing you how it works. And the second thing is I will be showing how to create one, right? So without any further ado, let's just dive in. Again, I'm going to my architecture diagram, right? So this is part 1. We will be creating a Cognito user pool and then a Cognito identity pool, right? So I have some, I would say, notes in here. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to share the same content with you. So I have this entire document showing you exactly all the steps in details, how to create all those different parts that I showed in the first video. For example, this entire architecture design, how it's being created. It will be shown down with the diagrams with the screenshots. How to create that on AWS, right? So don't worry if you miss certain steps. I will be sharing this thing again with you, but again, let's go back to part 1. So in the part 1, the services that we have been using is the Cognito user pool, the app client inside the Cognito user pool, and then the Cognito identity pool, right? So let's first understand, I would say, my apologies, I'm a bit tired. I would say a quick overview of the Cognito services, right? So what's a user pool? So Amazon Cognito user pool serve as a secure user directory, right? So remember this word, right? User directory. So it's pretty much a user directory, which kind of holds the username and then any other information that the user enters, right? And then an app client inside a Cognito. So the app client within the Cognito user pool represents the application interface for the user authentication, right? It's responsible for interfacing with the user pool to authenticate users using credentials like client ID and secrets to maintain secure communication, right? And then the second thing we have is a Cognito identity pool. So one is the user pool. User pool has the Cognito, has the app client inside it. And then another one is Cognito identity pool, right? So user pool is one thing. And identity pool is another thing. Again, if you're someone who already know the services, you can simply skip this thing. But it's for the people who have, I would say, a beginner level understanding of it, so it will be a good idea to go through it. So the identity pool, also known as federated identities, enable users to maintain temporary AWS credential to access other AWS services like S3, API Gateway, Route 53, whatever you name it in AWS, right? This allows for the creation of a secure and scalable way to authorize users to access AWS services directly based on their identity. So let me just give you I would say, an analogy for you to remember those 3 services or kind of like the difference between the services. Imagine you go to a library, right? So I am actually inside a library. That's why I'm going to give you an example of a library, right? And you wanted to access the services. You wanted to pick up one of the books on the shelves and you wanted to read it, right? So how do you do that? You go to the front desk, they give you a library card. And that library card is actually your app client, right? So the app client is an interface between the user and then the authentication service. For example, when you go to the front desk for registration, they ask your first name, last name, email, phone number, whatever information they need. And then they create an account for you. And then if you look, all the people who use the library services, there will be a user directory in there. So the Cognito user pool is actually the user directory holding all the information about the library users, right? So for example, it's John, it's Mona, it's Lisa, it's whoever it is. So that information is being stored somewhere. It is a directory. In this case, it's a user pool, right? And then all the library cards that you have in use, those are the app client. It's an interface between the library and you to be able to use those services. And then imagine your library card has a barcode, right? And then that barcode is actually the secret that you use or you create with the app client. And then the cognitive identity pool is actually not a tangible thing like a user directly in case of user pool or an app client in case of, I would say, a library card. It's actually the authorization for you to be able to use those services. For example, I'm going to go outside of this room, I'm going to grab a book and I wanted to read it, right? So that's an authorization. If I wanted to, I would say, want to take this book home with me and read it, I would actually have to check out that book. So now I'm authorized to use those services. Or if I have booked this library room, right, it's because I have been authorized to book this library. So that's something that you can remember. A user pool is actually a user directly in case of a library of the library user's information stored in a directory. Even that can be an Excel sheet. An app client is actually, I would say, in case of analogy, a library card with a barcode, and the barcode can represent the secrets created with the app client. And then the cognitive identity pool is actually the authorization or the access that you can have to access those services. So that's about the, let's say, cognitive services. So how do we go ahead and create those services? So first, create a cognitive user pool. We can create a user story pool. So for those detailed steps, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of put that on the side a little bit, go to the cognitive service in here, and I'm going to create it. So it's, you can see I'm already here on the cognitive and the user pool, but in case you don't know how to go there, which I'm sure you know how to go there, you click on the cognitive and then it just takes you to this page. If it's not your first time, if it's your first time, it'll take you to like kind of like a front page, but still you will see something where you see create a user pool. So I click on creating a user pool. So I'm going to minimize, smaller this section a little bit so I can see what's happening on this side. So they say create a user pool, this one. So I already have created this one. So I'm going to just name it a different thing. But anyways, so we are on the user pool. It's cognitive user pool has already been selected. So let me just go to these steps in here, like how I have actually done it here. So I am on the same page. I'm going to the cognitive user sign-in options. They can sign in either with a username, a preferred username, or they can do that with an email. And then see user requirements. So allow users to sign in with a preferred username. Anyways, okay, and then so allow users sign in with a preferred username. Yes, make the username case sensitive. Let's just leave that for now. So I'm going to click next and then say cognitive custom. I would say the password policy. I'll just leave it as is, right? So at least one number, one special character, an uppercase, a lowercase. That's not important. I'm going to skip the optional MFA option. As you can see, I have already added this information in here. So when you're creating, you can just follow the way it's being done here. And then since I'm not using an MFA, those other options don't matter. Say user account recovery, that can be self-enabled account recovery. It's recommended, of course. Let's go with that. An email, through an email, yes, let's go with that too. Keep it default. And then so they say and this one, self-service sign up. Yes, we have to enable self-service registration because otherwise the user won't be able to register for this app. And then user attribute verification in user account confirmation. So they say it's allow Cognito to automatically send messages to verify and confirm their account, right? If you have seen my previous video when I was creating an user, that's when I was actually able to get the confirmation code, use that code, and then confirm my account. So if you have checked this thing through an email, then that's when you will get it. Verify attributes changes through email address. So that's not important that we have to consider. So required attribute as of now, email, at least you have to add an email to be able to register as a user. So there are custom attributes for now. I will not go with it because once I create it, I will be needing to add a custom attribute for the profile picture because that's not here. But I can do that once I actually have created this user pool. So I think so I have covered pretty much everything. So I'm just going to click next. Say send email with Amazon. No, so I want to send an email with Cognito. That might be much better. And then do you want it to go with from email? No, we don't have to go anything, keeping everything default. The reason I'm not going into details in this is because that's not relevant to how you can use a Cognito as of now, at least for more detail. This is not important, but simple steps might be better for this case. Let's just go with that. And now you have to name it, right? So the one that I used in here was a story user pool, right? Let's just put the same name. So stories, user pool, but I'm going to add one more to it, right? Today is December 30th. So I know that this is the one I created for today. And then here it says hosted authentication page. No, just because we have our own authentication. So in here, I have my own sign up and sign in page code the user can use for that. So I'm not going to use the Amazon Cognito hosted UI, right? And then here, this is also an important part. You have to make sure that you click on the public client. See, there's another one called confidential client and others. So that's not, I would say, the case in creating the user pool for this app. Make sure you create a public client. And now I have to name a client. So I can just put stories client in December 30th, right? So make sure this part in here that it says generate a client secret, that you click this thing. And this is where I mentioned, so now you're kind of adding a name to your library card if I'm using the same analogy. And then the client secret is actually the barcode that's present on your library card. So make sure that you actually generate this one because you will need it. And then by that, I mean is when you actually integrate your Cognito with your front end, there is a place where you actually have to add that information. And there, as you can see, I have the client secret, the client ID, and the pool ID. So that's the time when you need it. So you have to make sure you have that, I would say generate a client secret has to be checked off, right? So advanced app client attributes read and write, really not important at this point. So I'm just going to click next, right? Now it's the last part. I have to review everything. Okay, so I have my email, username, I have no MFA, I have self-service sign up enabled, required attributes, at least an email. And I think so everything else is just default, and I just create user pool. So that user pool is now being created. So let me just go, and then I say last updated, and I have to go. So this is the one we have, right? So once I create a user, that's when I will be able to see a user coming in here, right? So that's it for the Cognito user pool, but then there is one more service that I have to create still, and it's Cognito identity pool, right? And again, as you already have saw, the Cognito identity pool is for me now. If I create a directory for users to sign up and sign in and to hold their information, now for them to allow to use certain services, I have to create a service, and that service is actually identity pool, right? So let me just go here. So we created this, we completed the step for the Cognito user pool. Now it's actually Cognito identity pool. Again, I have steps in here, so you don't have to worry. So once I created on create, so I have two options. One is authenticated access, one is guest access, right? For now, since I actually want a user to sign up, confirm their account, and then be able to use the app, so I will go with authenticated access. At some point, if you wanted to go with, I would say guest access too, you can do that. But for now, is this. Now these authenticated identity sources, we have so many. If it's a third party, it will be Web Federation, it will be Facebook, Google, Twitter, Amazon, or anything. But for now, I want that this Cognito identity pool be linked to my user pool. because I want the user to sign up and sign in, hold the user information in my Cognito user pool, and then it has to be now attached to that user pool to be able to access it, right? So if my user pool is actually my registry for the library users, and then if I'm giving, I would say, an access to the library services, then I have to say, okay, I have to refer back to that registry, that user registry for the library users, to be able to use those services. So once again, I can use those other services. In my case, I wanted to keep it to Cognito user pool. I click next, right? And then you say create an IAM role. So create this an IAM role, leave it for now. And then I will mention to you what an IAM role is and why we actually need it for this Cognito identity pool and what kind of permission policies we have to add to this. For now, they just give at least a name to this IAM role. So afterwards we can find it. So stories up, identity pool. It's a role and it's December 30th, right? So in here, you can see, I would say, the view document policy. So for now, I'm still not going into this one because I wanted to then tell you the difference between a trust policy and an IAM policy, but that will be for a different part. So let's just continue with this thing for now, and then say now in here, that's where I have to connect my user pool to my identity pool. So let's just put December 30th because that's easier way to find. So it's stories user pool December 30th, yes. And then I have to also add my client. So they just give you that option right away. Story app client December 30th, yes. So now connecting my user pool to my identity pool. And then say use default authentication rule, so that's fine. And then we are going to go inactive. So again, I'm not going to touch every single thing, but because if I start doing everything, this video will become pretty long. So let's just keep the default and only go with the steps that I need for this app. So I click next. I have to add a name. So I would say, again, stories up, identity pool, right? So that's a simple name, so you can remember this one. You can allow a basic flow, otherwise it really doesn't matter. So let's just go with next. So they give you an overview. Okay, so that's the name for the role. And then that's actually copying the user pool information that I have added, my identity pool name, and then it's kind of create identity pool. So that's what it is. And now you see in here, they say the authenticated role has been created successfully for this identity pool. This role has minimal initial permissions, then you have to add more policies to it. So I'm just going to click on this one. It will take me to the IAM role, I will say console. And now that's where the basic, I would say, information or basic permission level that it has. So if I go here, so before I go here, there's two things that you have to understand. One, places permissions. If you click here, then you kind of attach policies. For example, I wanted to attach kind of like S3 policy because my app is going to be connecting with S3. And also I wanted to add a DynamoDB full access. For now, I'm going with full access, but it's a good practice to only allow the services inside that's kind of the level of access inside the service. For example, in S3, I only would want it to allow a read rather than write and delete, right? But for now, let's just keep it simple. Add these two permissions. So now you can see I have permission level here, and then there's also another thing called trust relationships. So now you would want to know the difference between permissions and trust relationships. So let's just go with that, right? So these ones was actually the steps, how you create the identity pool. So let's just not go through them. So here you go. What I have in here is actually the difference between an IAM role, I would say, and a trust relationship. So the trust relationship determines who can assume the roles, for example, like a gatekeeper. And then the permission policy defines what actions or roles can they perform, right? So for example, if I again go to my library example, so me sitting in the library, so all of my analogies will be related to the library. It's this. So for example, it determines who. So the main part is who. So in this case, if it's me So I am the person who will be able to access certain services in the library, right? And then the permission library is actually what, right? So now remember this thing. So let's just me bold this thing so you know what it is. So bold and italic. The trust relationship is actually who can assume a role. So in this case, it's me. Permission policy is what actions I can perform with that role. For example, I can check out a book, take it to home with me. That's one kind of service. I can actually book a library room. That's another kind of action that I can do with that role. So now this IAM role that we have in here, it has a trust relationship. So who can actually use this role? In this case, it's cognito identity, right? So cognito identity is actually the name of, in this case, for example, I am a cognito identity. I'm actually assuming this role. So once, imagine I'm a cognito identity, and then I can go ahead and do certain actions, right? So now you can see trust relationship is what is the who can assume that role, and permission is what they can do. So for example, with that specific role, as an Amazon Cognito identity pool that I have assumed, what I can do is I can access S3 and I can access DynamoDB, right? So I hope it's kind of clear to you, but there are a few other things like inline policy, right? So if I go to the inline policy, you can actually add it in here. So create an inline policy. And this is kind of like a custom policy that you wanted to add yourself, and you can do certain thing with this. But what it is an inline policy? A directly attached policy to a single user or role, providing specific permission. So if, for example, in the library, if they would want to allow me to use a specific service that's not being allowed by, excuse me, by other people to use it, then in that case, I would use an inline policy or a specific policy that I can do. So once again, trust is the who, permission is the what, right? So I hope it kind of was clear to you, and then we covered the identity, I would say, part as well. So that's, I would say, it for now. The next part that actually is remaining is I have to go ahead and actually integrate those services into my front end, right? So if I wanted to go once again really quickly, going back up there. So in the part one, what I actually did was I created both Cognito user pool, Cognito identity pool, and then the IAM role. And now I have to use those things and actually integrate it into my app. So that's the next part. We just go back down there and then say services and part one. That's something we actually did cover, right? Okay, so I think so this is it's just user interaction with the app, what happens in the backend. That's still part of the part one, but it shows what happens. So for example, user action enters their personal information. What happens in the backend is the app client sends the sign up request to the Cognito user pool, right? So whenever someone sign ups, the user pool creates a new user, so it's obvious. And then the app client secret is used to authenticate this request secretly, right? So this is, for example, I went to the front desk of the library. And then they created a new account for me. So that's where my information was saved. And then I was giving a library card. And that library card has a barcode, which is a secret in this case. And then with that barcode and that library card, I will be able to be authenticated next time I wanted to check out a book. And then email verification and account is user action is actually user enter confirmation code. The backend, the confirmation code is sent to the Cognito, right? Upon successful verification, Cognito marks the user account as confirmed. Perfect. And then user sign in and accessing the story. So now the user sign in and select a certain story to read. What happens in the back is the user credentials are verified by the user pool, because that's where the user information is. The user pool is actually a user directory. Upon successful sign-in, Cognito Identity Pool grants temporary AWS credential. Once again, remember, these are temporary credentials because you can only access the Cognito services if you are signed in through the app, right? So if you wanted to use the service again, so the next time you come, you have to sign in through the app again to be able to access the AWS services. So here it is. And then these credentials allow the users to access the story from this tree, which makes sense. So there might be some information about the temporary access. For example, we have an app. Why would one need to sign in every time they want to do? So again, it depends on the level of access you wanted to set up. If you wanted to give them a kind of like an access, so once you sign in through your app, you don't have to sign out and sign in again. But again, the word temporary means, and here is like, it doesn't have like, once you sign in through the app, it doesn't mean you can access the story on your other service, on your other devices, or maybe through the browser or something that you're not authenticated. So if you're signed in through the app, it simply means they're actually through that time period that you're signed in and you still haven't signed out, you're able to use the services in the backend, in this case, which is S3. So the part that I was talking a while ago was about integrating the backend with the front end. So the kind of information that I actually need is the Cognito user pool ID, and then the app client ID and its secret, and then the Cognito identity pool. And then as I have showed you in my, let's say, front-end code, so I'm going to delete my previous one, added the new ones to you. So just to see how it works. So I'm going to pause here for a second so I can delete my existing one and then add the new ones. So I will be back with you just in a second. So welcome back. So what I did was I actually removed my existing client ID and information. So I can add the one that we just created right now. So what you can do, first thing first, we go to the Cognito identity pool and then we grab that one and add it here. So here you go. I'm going to, I think so I'm already on my identity pool. Yes, I am. So this is where you actually grab the Cognito identity pool, just copy it from here. And then you just add it here. So make sure you have the quotation marks on both sides. So for it to work, so that's it. And now I have to go with my Cognito user pool. So first thing first, I want to get my user pool ID. So I go to my user pool, and then in my user pool, let me see which one we created just right now. This one. This is my pool ID. So I come here, and then I'm just going to add it here. And then I'm going to go to my app client. So if you wanted to look for the app client that you just created, so make sure you come here for the app integration. Scroll all the way down. This is where you find the app client. Click on this one. This is the app client ID. You grab this one, and then this is your app client ID. So you just have to add it here. Perfect. And then next one is show secret. So you can just toggle this in. Toggle on, copy this thing, and then just come back to the client secrets. So, and then kind of just paste it here. Awesome. So that was the backend integration. So I won't go into again signing up a user because that's something we already did. So what we did was actually we created a Cognito user pool, a Cognito identity pool, and then we added the integration we did the integration with the front end. So I think so that's it for now. What I'm going to do for the next part that we have, which is creating the CloudFront Route53 and which is CloudFront custom domain and Route53. That's something I will be doing it in the next video. So I would say that's it for now. We just covered part 1. So I'm going to be seeing you again in the next part. Bye for now.